Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to my new quarterly TBR video. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I really want to read in April to June this year. I am participating in the Owl's Magical Readathon during the entirety of April, so I have posted a different TBR for that video, but I thought I'd make this TBR anyway because I've already done the first quarter of this year, so I wanted to make another video for the second quarter of this year and keep it consistent. And I do have a little bit of overlap from my first quarterly video until now because I haven't read all of the books that I talked about in that video, so there are going to be a few new additions to this TBR as well and a few new releases that I'm really looking forward to. So I figured why not include it all in a new quarterly TBR video. So recently I went to Supernova, which is a giant pop culture convention in Melbourne, and I picked up a couple of comics. So those are the things that I want to read next on my TBR. So the first comic that I want to read is Volume 2 of Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, and this follows a group of girls in the 1980s and they're paper delivery girls, and they kind of stumble onto this sci-fi story. And I don't want to say too much because the more vague I am, then the more surprises you'll realise going into the first volume. I initially thought it was a contemporary series, and that's not right at all. It's definitely a science fiction, and very heavily a science fiction. It has a lot of creatures in it that are non-human, and it tends to mess with time a little bit as well. So I can't wait to pick up this volume, and I actually do have a review of the first book in this series on my channel as well that is spoiler-free, so I will leave that link down below so that you can go and check it out if you're interested in this series. The next comic I actually also got at Supernova, and I met the wonderful Victoria Schwab, and I bought the first volume in her Steel Prince series. I don't really know much about this series except obviously it's fantasy and it sits before her Darker Shade of Magic series, which I read I think last year. This does follow the king in the Darker Shade of Magic series, and obviously this is set before he became a king, so he is obviously a prince in this series, but I don't really know much more about it other than that. V did list a couple of things in the Darker Shade of Magic series that were quite major but got brushed over about the Steel Prince, and she couldn't get those out of her brain, so she wanted to write a comic book series about him to highlight those things that he did. So it sounds like it's going to be epic, and I really can't wait to start this one as well. So earlier on in this video I did say that I had a couple of books left over from previous months that are still on my list to read. So the first book that I have left over still is Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard. I don't want to talk too much about Warstorm. I've talked about it in vlogs and in a couple of TBR videos already, but it's a young adult fantasy series and it's kind of got an X-Men flavour to it, and Warstorm is the last book in that series and I have it on audiobook, so I'm anticipating that I'll probably finish it in April because I want to read it as part of my Owl's Readathon TBR. It's kind of like a last minute addition if I'm being particularly ambitious, so I really hope that I get to that one. The next book that I've got left over from my January to March TBR is Unwind by Neil Shusterman, and this is a dystopian series where kids up to the age of 16 can have their bodies unwillingly donated and then unwound, so they donate their organs against their will, and that's kind of all I know about it, and I assume it follows some teenagers who are running away or trying to rebel against the system. I haven't started this yet. I'm not really in the mood for dystopian, but hopefully I'll pick it up very soon. And in addition to those two, I also have Zeros by Scott Westerfeld that's on my TBR. It has kind of a mixture of the first two that I talked about, so it's got the X-Men vibes like in the Warstorm series, and it's also got the dystopian vibes that were in the Unwind series, so it mashes them both together, and I believe it's written by Scott Westerfeld and two other authors. I'm really looking forward to that one as well, but I just, again, haven't been in the mood for dystopian, which is why I don't even have it with me actually, but it is on my TBR and I have not forgotten about it. Now I'm moving on to some books that are anticipated new releases, and the first one is Aurora Rising by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I talked about this in my anticipated releases video, and this comes out, I don't know if it's early May or the 30th of April, but I am going to the book launch for it on the 30th of April, so I can't wait to get my hands on that one. Again, I don't know too much about this one. All I know is that it's a sci-fi and has multiple characters in it, and it's written by two authors that I really enjoy and respect because they wrote the Illuminae Files series, and I really love that series. So I can't wait to pick up Aurora Rising and dive into a new sci-fi story by them. And still talking a little bit about sci-fi, J. Kristoff also has his sequel to Lifelike coming out, so that is Deviate, and that was going to come out in May, but I believe it's been pushed into June, so it still kind of counts towards this overarching TBR for the next 3 months, but I'm sad that I'm not going to be able to pick it up as soon as May. I can't really tell you what Deviate is about, but I know that it follows one of my favourite characters from Lifelike, and I did really enjoy Lifelike. I think I gave it a 3-ish to 4 stars, and I really wanted it to be a little bit more than it was. But in the last page and literally the last line is what made me want to continue on reading the next book, so I can't wait to build from the next book and see where that takes me because it follows one of my favourite characters from the first book. And I'm so lucky in May that I've got a favourite author publishing a new book in his series. Queenslayer is coming out in May, and it is I think it's the 5th book to the Spellslinger series. Again, I can't really say what that series is up to to because it's a significant chunk into the series by now, but Spellslinger is really, really fun. It's a young adult fantasy and it follows an underdog main character who you think might learn magic, but he gets cut off at the knees all the time and he has to bluff his way through situations. So that makes for very unique resolutions to any tension that comes up in the narrative, and he's just got such an amazing cast of characters that are built around him too, that he can kind of riff off and create that sense of humour as well. It is definitely one of my favourite young adult fantasy series and I will recommend it whenever it happens to come up. So I can't wait to read Queenslayer, and that doesn't come out soon enough. And then lastly on this TBR list, I'm going to be talking about a couple of audiobooks that I want to finish off, and I have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, I think is how I say her name, and that's kind of a dystopian drama book, and I'm reading it for the Owls Readathon. It was like a last minute surprise edition that I didn't expect to pick up during the readathon because it was a novel and it's a little bit longer, and I usually like limiting my readathon books to shorter things. But the audiobook's been really great. I don't know if I'm really interested in the aspects of the story because it leans more into drama than it does into dystopian. Basically, there was a huge plague that wiped out a lot of the population, and we follow a couple of characters that are related or have some correlation with a film star that was set in the world that had not been wiped out yet, and so it follows those characters and they're in a travelling symphony. I don't really know how to describe much more than that. It basically goes back and forth between following characters in the past and following them in the present with this travelling symphony, and I'm finding it really interesting and I can't wait to finish that. I think I've got a couple of hours left of the audiobook, so by the time this is uploaded on my channel I probably would have finished it already. I also plan on starting Tower Lord by Anthony Ryan, and this is the second book in his Bloodsong series. I read Bloodsong about a year ago and I do have a review for it on my channel. In Bloodsong it's written from one character's perspective and it follows him as he goes to a school and he learns how to not become an assassin, but he learns all of the tools of the trade to become an effective soldier, and he accidentally gets caught up in a lot of politics with the king as well at the same time. I think I'm going to have to go back and refresh my memory on what actually happened and the details of it because it's been so long and I don't really remember it, but I do plan on picking up this book and hopefully the sequel to this, and that's the entire trilogy completed. They are pretty big and they are thick audiobooks, so I'm hoping that I can get through them fairly quickly. I don't really want to linger on them too long because at the start of the year I read all of Brent Weeks' Lightbringer series, and reading all of those audiobooks that were high adult fantasy that are very complicated back to back at the start of the year kind of put me in this weird reading slump and reading funk, and I don't want that to happen again with this series. And I also have a couple of other high fantasies that are also adult that I want to pick up as well, so hopefully I like this one. I don't have really high expectations because I gave Bloodsong about a 4 stars. I really expected it to punch above its weight and it kind of fell a little bit short for me. Not that I didn't enjoy it, obviously I gave it 4 stars, so hopefully I like this one just as much or even more because we've built up the characters, we've built up the world, and now all that's left is to expand the plot, which I'm really excited about. In addition to Tower Lord by Anthony Ryan, I really want to read the Waking Fire Draconis Memoria series as well, and again I don't know much about this one either, and it's a pretty big fantasy book, but I know that it follows drakes instead of dragons, and that's really all I needed to hook me, to be honest, because anything with dragons or drakes in it is going to be something that I will probably enjoy. So I want to finish the Bloodsong series before I even pick this one up because I don't want to mix his writing styles into one in my head, and I'm going to be listening to them on audiobook, so it will be a lot easier to mix them up because often when I listen to adult fantasy on audiobook I find it harder to remember names or even know how to spell anything, so I'm going to put this on hold for a little bit until I finish the Tower Lord series, and then I'll definitely be picking this one up next. And then finally, as an audiobook, I have Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, and this is actually his second book in his First Law series. The first book is called The Blade Itself, and I read that again last year and I really liked it. It deals with very morally grey characters, and it's also multiple perspective, and it has kind of an underlying magic that hasn't really been explored yet, as well as a lot of politics that are taking place as well. And I did really like listening to it. I gave the first book about a 4 stars out of 5, and I can't wait to continue that as well. So I have the second book on my Audible account and I can't wait to listen to that next. So the books I talked about are definitely going to be on my TBR, but I've left it fairly loose so I can go to my shelves and pick and choose depending on what I want to read. If I don't have much room to move around my TBR, I tend to procrastinate things, and I don't want to do that with these because I want to really get them read so I can get my unread book count down as far as possible. So far this year I've read 20 books out of 100 and I really want to hit that 100. I'm hoping I do, but I might just hit 80, it depends. In the past I've read 70 to 80 books a year and I've also read about 120, so I really don't know what this year is going to hold for me. Thank you so much for watching this TBR video. I do have a bunch of stuff on my TBR ranging from comics to adult fantasy, so definitely let me know if you've read any of it. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for watching and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye!